So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our instructors for today. Our main instructor is Barbara Wishingrad from Sweetwater Collaborative, and we'll also have Josh Granning from Sweetwater Collaborative chiming in as well. Take it away, Barbara.
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for your interest in Site Assessment 101. It's pretty exciting. For me, it is, well, you know what, I just realized I'm not sure how to, if I click on this, I change it, right?
I'll advance it for you, Barbara, so you can just say next slide.
Okay, thanks. So site assessment is one of those things that is really empowering for homeowners or anybody who's interested in changing their landscape, especially for a more water-wise regenerative landscape. So that's what we're going to learn about today. Next. So first, we're going to talk about creating a site plan, and that is how to get it to scale, how to plot plants and trees that you already have, your irrigation, find out your soil type. And when we we're going to talk about water-wise opportunities like rainwater capture and gray water. Next. So there's basically two different ways that we're going to introduce doing a site plan. And in terms of this one that you can use graph paper, you know, now you can go onto the internet and you can find a way to download graph paper. You don't have to buy a whole packet of graph paper. And then you can get it that way. And this involves a lot of walking around and measuring yourself, and it's really good to have a helper to hold one end of the measuring tape while you start. So the very first thing you do is that you measure the boundaries of your lot, or the place that you want to do the site plan for, and then you measure and draw in the footprint of your house, other structures, your driveway, pathways, all kinds of hard structures. Next. So this is, for example, initial site plan that shows the house. It shows trees. It shows large bushes. It shows some garden beds in the back that have like that scratchy, that scribble on top of them. It shows north. It shows a garage. Next. And this is, again, we have a lot of information that we're going to cover today, and we really are happy that you're going to get the PowerPoint afterwards so that you can review everything and do this on your own. There's another way of creating a site plan using Google Earth Pro, and Google Earth Pro is a free download. It's a little different from Google Earth because it has some extra features, and the feature that we're going to talk about are only in Google Earth Pro. So you zoom into the site until you get the property to its boundaries. If as you're zooming in, it starts to get a little off kilter, you tap the U on the keyboard and that makes it upright again. And make sure that north is indicated on the image or that you mark it once it's printed. So next. So one of the things that's important to note is that after you get your initial site plan, that you're going to want to make copies of it, because you want to have the site plan as is, you want to have a lot of things as is, and you want to also be able to add what things you would like to replace things with or add. So there is a specific feature in Google Earth Pro that helps you measure the boundaries with all of the boundaries and the hardscape, softscape, buildings, everything without having to actually walk it. So you hit the ruler, which is one of the tools up on, you can see it on the lower, on the upper left. There's a ruler. And then when you get your ruler, you hit polygon. And if you go to area and you choose square feet, when you're on area, and then you'll just have to follow through, you can click a dot on, okay, you see here, there's a garage, which is behind the house, and there's a blue dot and a red dot and some yellow lines. I don't know if you can see that close. Yeah. So as you click on one, it starts the measurement. And then when you click on the next one, it ends the measurement. And if you make that a square, then you'll get the square feet, which is something that we're going to need to figure out the rainwater harvesting part and also other parts of the landscape, how to figure things out. Next. So with a copy of your site plan, You can mark what trees you have, what, your ground cover areas. You can use, like, for example, different symbols. You can use a wavy circle or other kinds of symbols to indicate large masses or large plants. And this is also a chance that you could, on this site plan or on a separate copy of the site plan, you can mark all of your utilities. And there are general colors that are used for the utilities commonly: blue for water, yellow for gas, red for electric, orange for cable and communications. And you can call Dig Alert at 811 if you need help locating your utilities. It's also good to mark your sewer. And these are ways to help you understand where you do or don't want to, plant or put hardscape or whatever. It's just good to know where your utilities are on your site. So next.
Also on that last one, I'd just chime in real quick, Barbara, and say that valve boxes where irrigation, I noticed irrigation was on there too, but some valve boxes so we know where the irrigation lines are and where all the water is coming in and all those components. So those are a wise thing to also mark in this zone.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. So with an initial site plan, if you're not sure what kind of plants you have and if they are water wise, you can look for these 4 characteristics. And silvery or hairy leaves, tiny leaves, stiff leathery leaves, or solar tracking leaves. These are all indications that the plants are water wise. Next. And if you have lawn, it's good to know if it's cool season or warm season grass, and often it is a mix. But the type of roots or rhizomes will be different depending on whether it is cool season or warm season grass. Cool season grass is easier to kill or get rid of, and warm season grass is more common in our area. Also, a lot of people think that their grass might be dead because it's brown, but especially with the warm season grass, because you can see on the warm season grass on that side how deep those roots are. And they spread across the landscape underneath. So it can often look dead, but not really be dead at all and be able to come back pretty easily. Next. So here are some effective lawn removal tools that are natural. And just so that you know, the data shows that chemical removal of lawn is not the most effective. And there are many reasons why we wouldn't want to use chemicals. Bad for the environment, bad for our own health, bad for our pets, our children. So sod cutting and sheet mulching are 2 ways that are effective lawn removal. It's not like you're just going to remove the lawn and it's going to be gone for good. It is a process over time to keep lawn at bay, but it can be, these two methods help minimize the amount of effort that you will have in the long run to keep lawn at bay after you've done other planting, rework the landscape. Next.
Barbara, do you mind just going over the sheet mulching process a little bit more? I think that one's pretty new to some folks.
Okay, sure, thanks. So sheet mulching, the reason it's called sheet mulching is because it uses cardboard and then mulch. So cardboard is sheeted or placed completely across the lawn, including tucked into the corners. You might want to dig out, trench out all along the edge, and then tuck the cardboard in. And then you put 4 to 6 inches of mulch on top of that. And there is a handout that the city has about sheet mulching. There's also information about sheet mulching on the Sweetwater website. And what this does is that as the lawn starts to grow, when it gets wet, it needs photosynthesis. It needs the sun in order to continue growing. And it will look to find a way to get up through the cardboard and then up through the mulch and peek its head out so that it can actually get more energy. And so A certain percentage of the lawn will die before it even gets to the top. But once it peeks its head out, you really have to grab it and get rid of it, or it can just start spreading underneath again. So it's very effective. It's probably like 90%. So is sod cutting, but sod cutting, you don't leave the carbon in the soil, and sheet mulching you do.
Yeah, the method of sheet mulching and sod cutting, it gets you ahead of the game, and it starts to slow down this thing of grass that just keeps coming and coming and coming. So it just gets you ahead for a longer time, but you really have to stay on it and maintain it. Because if one of those little ones come up, like Barbara said, it'll start growing very quickly, and it'll turn back into that grass that you didn't want to be there in the first place. So it's really important to stay up on the task of cleaning it, season after season. There will be some little things that remain in some of the perennial plant coverage that you have around, or in the cracks along the pathway or the driveway. So there will always be some grass that kind of remains that you have to get after. So it's never done.
Yeah. However, if you get it as soon as you see it, the work is much less than if you wait and let it grow underneath. And I actually have a vegetable garden that I sheet mulched ivy, not grass. And it's usually like every spring, I have to do a really good, thorough weeding. And sometimes every 2 months I do some weeding. But initially when you start it, the sooner that you can get to it over and over and over again, the less work that you're going to have. Next. Okay, so again, I suggest that it might be a good idea to use a separate site plan to mark your irrigation. So you want to mark the controller and the valves. And you could even do a whole irrigation map, but the location of the controller and the valves is important. And then you can turn on each valve at a time, and you can notice some kind of things like, is there overspray? Is there water pooling? Is there clogging? And you might want to trace the different hydrozones and the different, so a hydrozone is a group of plants that have the same water needs. And generally irrigation, you want to set up irrigation so that plants that have the same water needs are on the same water line. And so you might also notice if you don't have that, so that can be changed.
Well, because I would also say that also, it hasn't always been common practice to do that. That's becoming the way that which we're doing it more and more and more. So that's a bit the hydrozoning. So we want to get the hedges all on the same thing. We want the grass all on the same line. We want the drought tolerance all on the same line. We want citrus trees on one line and deciduous fruit trees on another line. So we really want to break it up in terms of water need. But it wasn't a common practice before, and it's now becoming more and more such that way.
Yeah, and in order to be the most water wise, you really have to have your hydrozones dialed in so that you're not over watering some and underwatering others. And even if something is water wise, if you have like something that is a really low water native or succulent, that will need very much water, less water than something like, I don't know, kangaroo paws, for example, which is also a water wise plant, but needs more, like a 20% instead of like a 5% of the water. So next. So this is lyrics to a song, and I wish I had a better voice because I would sing it. I really like this little ditty here. And this is a permaculture singer-songwriter, Charlie McGee. And he says, take a handful of land, squeeze it in your hand, check out the display. If it stays together, it's clay. If it falls apart, it's sand. So this is like the basic of how do you know if you have clay or sand? This is the very first way that you can check it out. And then we'll go to the next slide and we'll see more about soil characteristics. So there is a jar test, and in this jar test, we're going to leave you this PowerPoint so that you can review it. But basically, you put the soil in the clear jar. I do not put in a tablespoon of powdered dishwashing detergent. I'm not sure why you do. But anyway, you shake it and you wait, and it will separate into sand, silt, and clay. Because sand has the biggest particles, silt has medium particles, and clay has the smallest particles. And that's why they settle like that. And you're able to see how much of which of each of those you have in your soil. And I would suggest that you do this in many different parts of your site, because you're going to have different kinds of soil and different parts. Some of them, you know, if you've had building and soil has been displaced, or if you've brought stuff in for gardens, or there's been landscaping, you know, things brought in over time, things are going to be different. And this little chart can also show you the percentage of each of these types of soil in your garden. Next. And it is interesting to see the drainage properties of your soil. And this is a pretty interesting test to do it. And basically you're explaining, you know, you dig a hole about 12 inches deep and 12 inches wide. You fill it with water to the top. You let it completely drain out. And how fast it drains out varies greatly, depending on what kind of soil you have. And sometimes it's really quickly. If it's draining very slowly, then note how much water is draining every 30 minutes. And that's what that tape measure is showing. Oh, well, in 30 minutes, it went down 8 inches. But I've seen some clay soil around here where it does not go even an inch in 30 minutes. So anyway, let's see the next slide. Gives you a little bit more context for this. So, you know, if it takes over 120 minutes, which is 2 hours to drain your soil, then your soil has poor drainage, and you could consider other methods of capturing rainwater or water than in the soil. Or if you do capture in the soil, which we just love having it in the soil, because the infiltration by rainwater and the combination of things that are done to create a rain garden helps increase the infiltration of water between 50 and 90%. But your earthworks should be very shallow and wide if they are in clay soil. So next. Okay, aspect means how much sun or shade you get in a particular location at a particular time of year. And that is really a good thing to be able to notice, because plants like either sun or shade or a combination. And so before you plant something, to make sure that it's successful, you want to understand when it's sunny, when it's shady there, and how long and what time of the year. So this is the exact same location, and you can see that at different times of day and at different times of year, the shade pattern is very different. Next. Okay, so alternative water sources for irrigation include rainwater, gray water, and mechanical water, which could be, for example, air conditioning condensate and reverse osmosis clear water. One that you do not want to use is the water from water softener. It's very salty and concentrated, and it is not something that we recommend that you put in the garden. So rainwater harvesting is just, I know people say there's no rain, but even if there was like 6 inches of rain, which is I think what we have had this year, On a 1,000 square feet with 1 inch of rain, you get about 600 gallons of water. So that means that you have had the capacity to collect 3,600 gallons of water just in a 6-inch rain season. So there is always a reason, especially in low rain seasons, to capture rainwater. It's always a possibility. There are also places where dew comes into these systems and adds more moisture, but this really allows water to slow spread and sink into mulch and soil, nourishing plant roots, creating a rich reserve of hydration for months to come. And it's natural irrigation for native and drought tolerant plants, the best practice in our Mediterranean climate. Next. So one of the things that we encourage you to use the site plan for is to mark your downspouts and the water flow on your roof. So it doesn't matter how slanted your roof is. All of these measurements are like just looking down, like from a bird's eye view. And the slantiness just shows which way the water will flow. So in this case, on the main roof where you see the solar panels, that largest roof, and there are 4 arrows, there was a high point on the roof, and then there are 4 downspouts. So seeing where the downspouts are, and then there is a shed on the lower right that has 2 downspouts and a garage on the upper right that has 2 downspouts. And so by seeing the water flow, you're able to know how much of that water is going into that downspout, because you can calculate either by walking around the property or through a Google Earth Pro what that what the square feet of that triangle is. Next. And here's some basic rainwater calculations. And we're really glad that you have this as a reference that you can come back to and look at again. You'll see it with the PDF. So if you want to figure out one area of your roof, because that's going to go to that one particular downspout, you figure out how much. So in this example, I didn't use round numbers. Josh reminded me round numbers might have been easier, but this is what I did. So it's, if you have a roof that's 8 by 12, it's 96 square feet. You multiply that by 0.6. Now, technically it's like 0.63. But the reason that I do 0.6 is for a couple reasons, because the exactness doesn't really matter. It's close enough. And also because there is something, depending on the material that your roof is, then there is there's some absorption that's going to happen on the roof, and so it's going to be a little less. So so this is the amount that's going to actually come onto the downspout. So in this example, 96 square feet by 0.6 is 58, and that's how many gallons of water you get in 1 inch of rain. So they're saying that rain is going to be less frequent but more intense. 1 inch of rain is probably, not going to be that common, and so that's one reason why I'm kind of going on a little tangent here. But rain barrels, which might have 60 gallons, aren't really a great option. We encourage you to have larger barrels and or earthworks in order to really capture as much water as you can. But in order to figure out the size of the earthworks, which is swales and basins and conveyances and rain gardens, and what's another word that people would know? Creeks. Sometimes people call them creek conveyances. You divide this number by 7.48, and that will convert to cubic feet. So in this particular case, for this, 8 by 12 area of your roof, you need to come up with 7.75 cubic feet in order to infiltrate 1 inch of rainwater just from this section of the roof. And typically it is filled with mulch, and you might have some rocking around it. But when you talk about that 7.75 cubic feet, if you're creating a swale that has sides that are 30% 30% degrees, so that you won't have erosion on the sides, then you have to count what's inside the internal number of the swale, not the external measurement. I hope that that made enough sense to people. So next. So in terms of costs and volumes of storage, this is one of the reasons why we're so excited about soil storage. Just for an example, you know, a 55-gallon rain barrel, this is, you know, say this much is this much cost, and a 3,500-gallon cistern, that's like about how much that cost, and how much soil, how much water fits into the soil sponge. It's like equal to more than 800 rain barrels, and the cost is much less. Next. Okay, gray water is another great source of irrigation for your garden. And it is, we call it gently used water from bathroom sinks, showers, tubs, and washing machines. It does not include toilet water, and kitchen sink water is illegal and can't be used in the state of California, although it is used, considered gray water in some other states. Gray water can not be totally pure water. And even if it looks dirty, it's safe and even beneficial source of irrigation water. It's a great use for it is to put it out into your irrigation. Next. So if, for example, you want a laundry gray water system, here are some of the things that you would want to consider. Do you have a slab or a raised foundation? It could be easier with a raised foundation. If you have a slab, you want the washing machine to be on an external wall or close to an external wall. If you have a water softener and you use sodium, you need to convert to potassium. That's because sodium is damaging to both soil and plants, so you don't want to be putting that out on the plants. And then you want to figure out how many gallons per load are used for your washer, and how many loads you do per week. You know, again, it's really easy if your washer is located on an external wall, and what kind of plants are you planning to irrigate. This is one way that you can get medium water use plants in the landscape and still not raise your water bill by putting them on gray water. So it's kind of exciting. We especially like fruit trees to go on these. And plants need to be level with or downhill from the top of the washer in order to do the laundry to landscape gray water system, which is permit free, doesn't have a pump. It uses the pump from the washer. So anyway, these are, we have a more extensive gray water questionnaire, gray water use questionnaire on the Sweetwater website. And you can find that under the Learn More tab. So next. So how to calculate how much gray water you can use. For example, you know, these are just pretty simple examples, right? For the shower, 2 people take 1 3-minute shower a day, and 2 people take 8-minute shower, sorry, 4 times a week. So you have to know what your shower head's flow rate is. And usually you can find that on the shower head, or if you've gotten a shower head like from the city, like a low flow shower head, those are usually 1.5. But anyway, so you just figure out the flow rate by what the minutes of the shower are, how many per week, how many people, and then you get the amount of gallons. So in this particular example, there's 212 gallons per week. And for the washing machine, they have a machine that uses 20 gallons per load, and they do 5 loads a week. So that's 100 gallons. So what you have is that you have 312 gallons per week of gray water that is available. And again, these can be not quite exact, but we want them to be as exact as possible, because maybe you do 5 loads a week, but some weeks you don't, or some weeks you do extra, or people come and visit and you do extra, you go out of town, or in the summer you shower more, or you know, there's variables. So you don't have to say like, oh no, I said that I take 7 showers a week and I have to do that in order for my gray water system to work. That's not exactly true, but we want it to be as close as possible. Next. And in terms of plant water needs, there are much more complicated ways to figure out needs for each plant. However, there's a general rule of thumb, which is pretty good for gray water, which is that assume that a ½ gallon of water is needed per week per square foot of plant, a plant that has medium water needs, such as a fruit tree. And you can use that calculation to figure out your, you know, that 312 gallons that you have a week, how is it going to be distributed in the landscape? So next. Mechanical water. So air conditioning condensate might be something that will be used more in the future, because you know, it's good to not use air conditioning, but it seems like with global warming, more people are using it. So if we are using it, at least if we can use the condensate, then that's recycling it in some way. And this is a particular picture of a place that used to be called the Impact Hub, and now it's called Kiva. I can't remember, I'm sorry. Kiva Co-work, that's right. And this is in the Funk Zone off of Helena, I believe. And when I was there for a site visit some years ago, I noticed that there was something dripping out of the side of the building, and it was air conditioning condensate. So we ended up creating a system where that air conditioning condensate feeds this tropical garden that has bananas, passion fruit, and coffee in it. So the condensate water can be used for, you know, landscapes, not for human consumption. But again, 50% of the water that we use in Southern California is for irrigation. So it's great to find other things that we can use to irrigate our landscapes. Next. And reverse osmosis clear water is something that they're doing a little better these days, but there's a lot of clear water produced when you get the reverse osmosis, the water to drink. And if it's not used to filter the water from a water softener, because again, that is too much sodium, then you can take this reverse osmosis clear water and reuse it to water plants, or sometimes we've created these lovely kind of water features or bird baths with it. So it's just something else that can be used in the landscape.
Yeah, I believe the ratio of kind of the old RO systems was for every 1 gallon of good clean water, you'd have 7 gallons of waste, the more saltier waste. And then now I think it's like 1 to 3 on some of them. So
yeah, well, we're glad of that. Thanks, Josh. Okay, next. I like the idea of knowing how much water I'm using, and the way to do that is that you can read the information from your water bill. There's also a way to find it out online. But if you still get a water bill, And usually when I ask people how much water they use, they give me a number of what they pay. But what you pay, because you also have sewer and trash and recycling on this bill, it's not all related to water. And so if you look on the second section, the lower section that says water information, that's when you're going to get the reading. The water is measured in HCFs, which is 100 cubic feet. So before 100 cubic feet of water. So earlier when we were talking about earthworks and we converted gallons to cubic feet in order to figure out how big the earthworks needed to be to put that amount of water into the landscape. We used 7.48, and for 100 cubic feet, the number is 748. There's 748 gallons in each 100 cubic feet. So in this particular bill, oh yeah, there you go. In this particular bill shows that you've used 9 100 cubic feet. And so in Santa Barbara, there are different tiers, and the first tier has a very low price of water. That's the most basic price of water. And then most people are in the second tier, where even if you have a washing machine or anything that's not absolutely basic, you end up in the second tier, unless you start going into the third tier where it's much more expensive. And so knowing how many HCFs you use and how close it is to the next tier can help you from going into that tier. And you can also calculate, how can I save if I'm using 9 but I want to use 5, so can't do that in the top of my head right now. 750, 15, 30, I don't know, is that 3750 maybe 5 HCFs? Can I get that? Can I cut down on the types of plants that I have so that they're not using that much irrigation? Can I use alternate sources of irrigation? What can I do to reduce the amount of HCFs in my bill? And if you don't know how much you have, then you don't know how much that you need to save, or if your water bill is or when your water bill goes over. And Madeline, could you explain, I forget right now, you said that there was a place that you could go onto the website, like if you have automatic billing or something.
Yeah,
to
so we
find your
have
HCFs.
we
Yeah.
have our online bill pay system. So if you haven't already signed up for online billing, you can do that through the city's website. It's called our Utilities Online platform, and it similarly will have links to bills if you want to look at them individually, or you can check your water usage information and it'll just show you a table that'll pull up on the web page, and it can show you, the past. You can put in a time range of how many months you want to see for your water usage information.
Great, thank you. Next.
Well, I was also going to say
Oh,
a good strategy to knowing how much water you're using too is in the winter time when we're getting rain, turn all your irrigation off, see how much you're kind of using in your household. That can kind of help eliminate some of the understanding of the water picture there as well. So that's something to kind of use as a tactic to see.
Yeah, that's a good point, Josh. This is an example bill, but it's a real bill, and this is pretty typical. Here we are in March. This is not this year, but we often get our rainiest month in March. And so you'll see the usage for this particular customer was less. It was about 4 HCF in March compared to August. You can see this is the difference in irrigation. Typically, we tend to see an irrigation bell curve where it's lower in the winter. It's highest usually in August or September, and then it goes back down in the winter. When it doesn't rain a lot, it's less of a clear distinction, but the average single family home in Santa Barbara uses 9 HCF, and that's typically with 3 or 4 folks and some irrigation. The more irrigation, the higher the especially summer usage is going to be.
great, thanks, Madeline. Next. So this is just an idea of the average California household water use so that you can see. And I think this is particularly important for or helpful for gray water, because we see that about 50% of our water bill is outside water use, except like Madeline just said, it fluctuates with the seasons. And so you can also see 9% comes from your washer and 9% comes from showers. And then there's 9% from faucets that you have a whole bunch of water that can be used for gray water. And it doesn't match the whole 50% of the outside, but it can significantly cut it down. Next. Okay, so as you saw on the last graph, I don't know if you noticed, but it said 8% of that water use is in leaks. And leaks are tricky sometimes, but sometimes people don't know they have a leak until their water bill spikes. So this is an example of how to check for a hidden leak. And checking your water meter for movement when you aren't using water is one of the best ways to check and see if you have a leak. And it's a good idea to know where your water meter is. That was one of the other things about when you mark out the utilities. It's good to know where all your utilities come in on the property, and you can lift up that, kind of cement cover to see the actual water. And I mean, the actual meter, sometimes you have to clear out. There's like either old leaves or sometimes growth, plants have grown in there, or there's like soil disturbance from gophers, and you want to clear all that away so you can see the water meter. And it's kind of exciting for the first time when you see the water meter is moving, and then when you turn all your water off, you make sure nobody in the house is using water, irrigation isn't on, then you can see. It's kind of empowering to know that you can check and you can say, okay, well, nothing's moving, so it must be me. I'm using too much water, or, oh, something's moving. Now I get to figure out where the leak is. So there are free dye tabs for checking your toilets that are available from the city at the 630 Garden Street location. Did you want to say anything more about this, Madeline or Josh?
Sure. I'll just say that the most common leak is toilets, about 20%. And they start small, they get very large, and they can also be really silent for a while. And then you might start hearing what we call a ghost flush, where you're the only one home, but the toilet suddenly refills. But it is commonly toilets that we see. The other one would be irrigation leaks. And those can be hard because they go down a gopher hole and they don't ever daylight, and maybe your plants just look a little happy in one area. But it's mostly toilets. And then we also definitely see a lot of irrigation leaks. Gophers will chew through something. So checking your meter is really helpful. And we also have a rebate for a flume device, which is a device that can be strapped manually to the city's meter, and it comes with a smartphone app, and it will transmit minute by minute water use information to your phone, and will also send you if you have a leak alert or a high water usage event. So we do have on our next slide, we have some upcoming webinars, and one of them is specifically about finding and fixing leaks inside and out. So this is covering the most common leaks that we do find. The city can help you try to determine where your leak is, or if you have an unexplained high water bill. So these are all of our upcoming classes this spring. This is our first one of this series. So Barbara and Josh were talking about rainwater harvesting. We have a whole class geared towards that. We also have a gray water class that we did in the fall, and that one is recorded, and that's on our website as well. So if you're interested in more gray water information, there's an entire webinar for gray water, and that covers both the laundry to landscape and the shower to flower type of systems. So that is on our garden classes webpage. And if you pull up your smartphone camera, you can just scan this QR code, and that will take you to the webpage that has all of our upcoming webinars, and it also has the recordings of the previous webinars, which includes that Greywater webinar if interested. So please feel free to join us for any of these upcoming webinars. Also, if anyone who registers for it will be sent the recording. So if you aren't able to attend it live in person, then you will be able to review it with the recording.